Well, good morning and welcome to Rouser Radio. It's Tuesday morning and I suppose that we have to get ready for the big chill. Apparently, the weather is going to turn tonight. Tomorrow is going to be very, very cold. So we called this morning's broadcast Freezing Tuesday. It's not freezing yet, but it's heading towards it, so get ready. Get ready and be well prepared. And we quite often don't get well prepared in this part of the world for either deep freeze or snow. Nobody quite knows whether it's going to snow, but it's certainly the conditions are going to be very typical for it, and as a consequence, we should be do whatever we can to prepare. And that means, I suppose, get plenty of woolies and plenty of boots that will grip on slippy surfaces. If you've got a car, make sure that's got all the old antifreeze in and that sort of thing. I'm not going to list it all. You all know what to do. But the important thing is that the freeze is on the way. So watch out for it, because I thought it was pretty damn cold yesterday. And having been up to put out the waste for recycle this morning, I can tell you it's pretty nippy as well. My cheeks were burning, and I'm not talking about the ones between my nose. It's pretty damn cold out there. So do get ready. Anyway, this is Rouser Radio. I'm Keith Hayes, and we are talking each day about things that affect us locally, whether they be international, national, or local. And one of the things I suppose that we should alert you to, because we do have, broadly, Gatwick Airport in our patch, because we're not just for Lewis, even though we come out of Lewis, we do try to look at what I call the horseshoe, which is Tunbridge Wells, down through Battle, Hastings, Eastbourne, Seaford, Newhaven, Lewis, Uckfield, and up to Gatwick itself. And in that area that we a lot of us travel, and if you want to go to Germany this morning, you can't. It's strange. We always think in terms of the French air traffic controllers going on strike and creating havoc, but this time it's the German security people at Frankfurt Airport. You can fly to other places in Germany, I believe, but but Frankfurt, which is the hub airport for Germany, is closed, and except to that traffic which is in transit. So, for instance, if you're going to Moscow and you're going via Frankfurt, you can get off the plane that you're on, you can transfer to the plane that you need to get on and go on to Moscow without any problem at all. If, however, you want to get into Frankfurt itself, or into Germany, I suppose, then you can't do it, because the security staff won't let you on. And British Airways, at least, are flying their planes backwards. Not backwards. Although it is possible to fly in a plane backwards. I've done it. Yeah. I'll tell you about that sometime. It's quite an interesting feeling watching the Earth go the wrong way, as you appear to be flying the right way. Anyway, the British Airways planes aren't flying backwards; they are flying back without any passengers at all. So, if you are onward passenger, if you're going somewhere other than Frankfurt, by all means go and catch an aeroplane. If you're expecting anybody from Germany, forget it. If they're coming out of Frankfurt. It's not only British Airways, but most airlines have cancelled their flights today, most of them. So be aware, if you're going to Gatwick and you're expecting to get onto a flight that has anything to do with Frankfurt. And to some extent, I suppose, it will affect Germany, because Frankfurt is by far the biggest hub for air transport in Germany. Anyway, why don't we just take a little look at what we've got here. I have absolutely no idea what sort of music we've got this morning. So let's try this one, which is from a group called Bensound. And Bensound are very good. They have some terrific music. And for non-profit organisations, which we are at the moment, they allow you to use this music free, as long as you say where you got it. And this comes from Bensound. So if you want to buy music for any reason to show publicly, to sound publicly, go to Bensound. Very good value, the stuff you have to buy. And if in fact, like us, you're a non-profit, they'll let you use some of it for free, and it's jolly good. So Bensound, thank you. And here comes something called Endless Motion. Let's see what it's all about. Well, that was called Endless Motion, and I'm still experimenting with our studio, shall we put it that way, and I hope that came out to you. Sometimes there are little flashing lights where I'm not expecting them, and there are other times there are flashing lights where I'm not expecting them. So I'm always very careful about how we think that you're listening to something and you're not. But anyway, we do our best, and let's see how that came out this morning. One of the things that I think we really need to worry about is the scare stories that come out at the moment about Brexit. I don't want to get involved in Brexit. I had a drink on Sunday night with good friends. In fact, they treat me as part of their family since I lost my wife 4 years ago. Delightful family. And we meet whenever we can on a Sunday night to have a drink and a chat. And we are at totally opposite ends of the pole on Brexit. So what we do is we have a little nibble and say we're not going to fall out over it, and then we leave it alone, just in case we do. But there we go, a little cough in the morning. Who doesn't have a little cough in the morning? But it doesn't matter which side you're on. You know, people keep on writing articles about which side lied and which side didn't, and then books come out saying, no, it was that side and that side. They keep pointing the fingers. And in between time, what's happening is our leaders are getting us deeper and deeper into a mess in Westminster. Now, that's going to affect our area, Lewis, and the small towns across the southeast. So we need to be cognizant of it. And how do you tell which is the scare story that is going to be closest to reality? But, the latest one is that we're going to have food shortages and we're all going to be in a dreadful mess and so on and so forth. Well, I worked in Moscow, and I've worked in other parts of Balkan countries when there have been so-called food shortages, mostly because of the upheaval after the change of government from authoritarian to democratic, and everybody eventually finds enough food to eat. But I'm a war baby. I was born in 1939, and in 1943 or 44, I suppose, the age of 3 or 4, I was beginning to become aware of my surroundings. And there were, shortages of everything. Nowadays, those people who were born in the 40s and perhaps even the early 50s are living longer because we had such an excellent diet in those days. Why? Because of food shortages. Now, I say to people, I love liver and onions. Oh, my goodness me. And in a restaurant in London the other day, I had brains on toast. You see, war babies were offal eaters because the whole idea of a steak was something that we talked about as being American. Is it a steak? We don't eat steaks in this country. And we didn't, because we didn't have the food. So that diet that we had in those days stood us in good stead. And rather than popping our clogs, you have to put up with us when we get to 80, and probably when we get to 90, and possibly, even 100. Would you believe? Oh, no, they say. No, we can't do that. But food shortages, but it wasn't just that. The thing that quite often people think of as food shortages today are luxuries. We use camp coffee to make a liqueur. If you actually take some vodka and what was camp coffee, which was the coffee we drank in the 1940s, and it comes out of a bottle, and in fact it's chicory essence. When I was given my first real cup of coffee, I said to somebody, "That's not coffee." that's how different the stuff is. But camp coffee was what we drank. And, if there's going to be a shortage of coffee, let's go back to camp coffee. With some hot milk in it, it's not half bad. And even if you don't want to drink it with hot milk, what you can do is get a bottle of vodka and use some camp coffee in it. And that'll settle your desire for a cup of coffee. But also, sweets are on ration. And they came off ration in about 1951-52. And everybody immediately went and raced in and not believing that it was true, bought every sweet in the shop. So they had to put it back onto ration because the manufacturers couldn't keep up. But I was given each week, I was given a bar of chocolate. Well, I wasn't given it. My parents kept it for me. And I was given a square of chocolate per day. That was my ration, a square of chocolate per day, and I thought that was pretty generous. Nowadays, if I'm like everybody else. Give me a bar of chocolate and I've scoffed the lot within seconds. It's dreadful. But if I have to do without that, I'm well prepared to go back to a square of chocolate per day. And if I don't get that, I'm not going to feel necessarily deprived. So all these scaremongering stories about food shortages is, what do we mean? Do we go back to a healthy lifestyle, perhaps? Oh dear. I don't think that they're going to close the gyms, so perhaps a food shortage with an idea of a few more gyms staying open, a few more hours, and a few more of us going might not be a good thing, not be a bad thing. Okay, I'm doing enough now to get hanged by some of you, so what I'd like you to do is join me in a little experiment, because one of the important things I think about Lewis is its political life has been quite remarkable throughout 1,000 years. And the Battle of Lewes of 1264 is regarded by historians as being the first signs of democracy in England. Simon de Montfort and the barons took on the king. They fought at the Battle of Lewes, just outside Lewes, which spilled over into the grounds of the priory. So in 1264, this huge priory, which had been formed by William de Warenne, who fought with Norman the Conquest. He fought with William the Conqueror and was granted all the lands around here, and his wife was quite religious, and she built this convent, this priory, which turned out to be huge. But anyway, the fighting spilled over, and on the site of the agreement that the king signed with the barons, there stands a knight's helmet. And just before going back to the knight's helmet, the next day after the agreement was signed, the first parliament, even though it wasn't a parliament that we would quite recognise today, but it was a parliament in which the barons had a say and the divine right of kings came under threat, it took place the very next day. So a very historic place and a very historic battle, sometimes known much better by our American cousins than it is by us. The reason for this is the site of what happened in the priory has a knight's helmet, a medieval knight's helmet on. It's about 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall perhaps. We call him Genry, and he figures in some of our television programs on our sister station, the We're Rouser Radio. The sister station is Mirador, and it's taking a rest until February the 4th, but for the moment you have to put up with us. But the knight is very symbolic and quite a magnificent sculpture, I suppose. It's more than a statue, to a very important time in English history. Well, we're flubbing a wee bit at the moment. Probably because our mouth is getting a little bit dry because we've been talking for 17 minutes or so. So let's. What I wanted to do was to experiment, because I've got here a piece called "The Sad Night," and I would love you to see what it's like, because I haven't actually. I heard just a tiny little bit of it, and it doesn't sound very sad. But see what you think. Here is the Sad Night. Well, sounds sad enough to me. So there we are. That's the Sad Night, and hopefully it's getting through to you. As I say, this is a new system that I'm using this morning, and I was expecting a flashing light to tell me that the music was coming through, and it doesn't seem to be there. So I'm hoping that you're not getting sort of blanks while we're supposed to be playing music. If you are, then I guess that we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and find out exactly what's going on. But anyway, I do know that the mic is working, so you must be hearing something from us. I would have thought, and it does. The little pulse at the top says that we're live. So hopefully we're not just talking to ourselves. Well, of course we're talking to ourselves. We haven't built an audience yet, but we've established now that we're here, and bit by bit it is circulating via Facebook and YouTube and so on and so forth. So here is our program for the morning. Now, the whole point of Rouser Radio is to look at things which are upsetting for the little guy. And yesterday we talked about the fact that Lewes District Council is going to be sued for $11.5 million, which I suppose will come out of our taxes, but $11.5 million because it got the site of some housing development wrong and cancelled the contract with the firm, the company that were going to build the houses. And they are saying, well, hang on, chaps. We put out a lot of money in developing this before you turned around and said you suddenly didn't want to do it or couldn't do it or whatever. And that's not our fault. It's your fault. And we've lost as much as 11 million. According to the pundits, it depends on who you listen to. A bleating man from the Lewes District Council, I'm sorry. Every time Lewes District Council name is mentioned, I can't help but chuckle. It's in such a mess. It's in a bigger mess, I think, than Westminster is. And Westminster's in a big enough mess. But anyway, somebody from the council says that it'll only cost $500,000 to defend. Other people have said, hang on, you're talking about $1 million here. And where's that money going to come from? Well, I can feel my pocket being picked already. So that's what we were talking about yesterday. And those are the sort of things that we need to highlight and we need to sort of get the community talking about. Because if the people don't want change, change won't happen. And if the people don't want change, that's fine. Let's not change. But if the people want change and they don't do anything about it, don't let's hear the bleating. Don't let's hear people say, do you know what that council's done? Oh, and some of our taxes are too high. Well, what do? We did nothing. Many of the quotes that came out of the Second World War are very apt. Wherever you live and wherever you, whatever time zone you're in or whatever period of history you're in is, evil flourishes when good men stand by and do nothing. So I hope that the very least that we do is that we will get people so angry at what's happening that they will demand that proper attention is paid to by our councils. But it's not just a council. I had a run-in with one of my banks the other day. Banks aren't nice places anymore. You can't talk to anybody direct, and if you do, you have to make an appointment for a week or 2 weeks in advance. The staff are very lovely in these banks. They're very charming and they are very pleasant and so on. But basically, we're run by a bunch of computers, or the banks are run by a bunch of computers, which means we're being run by a bunch of computers. The other day, I had an appointment in London made after I'd pressed 1, pressed 2, pressed 3, pressed 4, and eventually got through to a real person who made me an appointment, and it just shows how good the computers are, but she got the place wrong. So I turned up at my regular bank, my branch, which used to be right in the heart of the city, and it was a poultry, where if you around the area of St. Paul's, a lot of the streets are named after the traders that used to trade there in medieval times. And this used to be on Poultry. It's now on Great Victoria Street. But I hived up with 15 minutes to spare, only to discover that I was supposed to be at London Bridge. So I set off. I still got 15 minutes. I set off to find the branch at London Bridge. Nowhere to be found. Couldn't see it at all. Popped into one of the really high skyscrapers there, where a very charming young lady looked on her computer, because she said, we didn't know there was a branch around here, looked on the computer and said, well, there's one if you want to walk 10 minutes down the road. Didn't sound right, but anyway, I thought at least I could get a steer from there. And by the time I'd finished, I got onto Tower Bridge. I walked back over Tower Bridge, fuming, got onto the underground, at Tower Bridge in London and went back to my next appointment, which was at midday, having wasted an hour and being totally sent it in the wrong direction. Now, I felt a bit guilty in case some of it was my fault, had I misunderstood. And I met people at lunch, and they said that they, having the same bank and the same branch, had discovered that the deeds to their property, which they'd lodged with the bank for safekeeping, couldn't be found. Or at least every time they asked to have them sent back, there's either a silence or the people dealing with it are sort of prevaricated, and he still hasn't got his deeds back. But his comment was very telling. If I owe them as much as £1, there is a letter to the postbox the very next day demanding it and setting out the statutory rights of the banks to charge us fees because we've been naughty boys, the fees that they can charge and that they will charge. But when it's the other way around, there is no comeback. And that's something the government is going to have to take a look at. I give you an example. Many of us don't get a salary check. We don't get it every 2 weeks or every month or whatever. It doesn't come in at the same time. But when I buy a service, particularly if I buy it through a credit card, there is a date on which I must pay, right? Direct debit, so-called. I must pay it on this date. Well, sometimes my money doesn't come in until 2 or 3 days after that date. Can the banks be flexible? Can the credit card companies be flexible? No, they cannot. They just pick up the phone or through the computer say, charge this guy another 12 quid. And that's not the way to help business flourish. It's certainly not the way to save the high street. So I think that banks have got to come under great scrutiny once the people in Westminster, once our government has started to get its act together and stop behaving like a bunch of idiots and causing such mass confusion that they've got obsessed with one issue and they're letting all sorts of other things, whether that's in environment or education or you name any of the other things that government should be looking at on our behalf and being controlling on our behalf, which are being let go. So the banks really need to be looked at very carefully, and if they're not going to, then we can continue to see the high street disappear, and we can continue to, no matter how many people say to youngsters, become entrepreneurs, is they're going to run in the opposite direction. Give me a check, give me a check, give me a check. What happens to our innovation then? Ah, boy, have I had a really good time this morning. I've been able to be a curmudgeon. I've moaned and groaned about everything, and I've done it for 28 minutes and 40 seconds at the moment. So it's almost time to say goodbye. So we'll actually look to see what we shall perhaps... well, we'll play you The Sad Night again, that's for sure. But here's something called Sunny, by our good friends at Bensound. So let's try that and see if we can go out on a happy note. All right, I'll be back tomorrow morning. Keith Hayes, Rouser Radio, coming out of Lewes for South East England, but also broadcasting to the world. Toodle pip.